Rumors about the new residential complex river began to dissolve, even when in its place there were dilapidated two-story buildings. And the project was not even signed. Another person with a meager parking lot was erected on the outskirts of where I lived, not far from a brick factory. Getting here from the city at the end of the day was already very difficult because of the critical shortage of minibuses, and now it threatened to become impossible at all. 1,000 new apartments next door scared the old-timers. Less than a couple of months later, an article appeared in the local newspaper about the cursed German burials under old houses. The authors, and as it turned out later, they were two elderly aunts, clearly hinted that the construction would turn into a nightmare. However, on the day the article was published, the project was signed, and soon the first construction screens were raised over the area. Scandals continued throughout the construction. Mostly old women protested, while adults fussed with mortgages in order to tear up their apartment before the next crisis. And when the boys and I saw a large playground with outdoor simulators in the picture of the project, we were completely delighted, and began to laugh at the angry and dissatisfied grannies. When we started the 7th grade, the construction was completed. Some classmates moved to new huts, including my best friend Ilyuka. His yard has become a permanent place for most walks. There it was possible to rollerblade on smooth asphalt, and on a skateboard, and on a bicycle. Soon the tenants began to disperse our noisy pack. Some of the guys moved to the other end of the district, where a new sports complex was just opening with the same playground as in Ilyukin's yard. But the most persistent still remained in their favorite place. It was even better in a small company. After school, we changed clothes and immediately rushed to Ilyukin's house. We played hide-and-seek and catch-up, dabbled in simulators, and in the evening, we gathered in a gazebo near the fence, behind which the forest began, to burn leaves and paper in a common barbecue, and listen to horror stories. Of course, we have absorbed all the rumors and old wives' gossip about the new residential complex. Everyone really liked that it was very cozy and fun during the day, and with the arrival of darkness at once, it becomes mysterious and creepy. The bikes accumulated during the construction immediately came out. Like real monster hunters, we washed every reinforcement bone of this huge house, assuming we're the damned spirit or zombie lives here after all, and imagining how we would deal with him if he jumped out from around the nearest corner now. Sometimes the guys brought friends from other classes and schools, and we hounded the same story over and over again, sometimes getting confused or deliberately changing details. To this day, I remember several of them. I even wrote down some of them for the future, as I knew they would come in handy. The first story we called Breathing. Only the lazy one didn't whisper about her at the time, and we were always surprised if a new acquaintance didn't hear anything about it. The two-story buildings were still boarded up and waiting for demolition. No one really guarded them, although the territory was already fenced. It is not surprising that the local group of high school students quickly noticed a good place for gatherings. One night, they broke down the boards on one of the windows that faced the forest and climbed inside. There they went out into a dark entrance and climbed into an empty apartment on the second floor. They put music on the speakers that were fashionable at that time in the form of a can of cola, lit candles, began to drink and smoke. And suddenly, a couple of hours later, they all clearly heard a cough, as if someone had smelled the smoke from cigarettes, and coughed unaccustomed. All four guys were sitting in the same room, silent and looking at each other. Turned off the music, listened. The cough was repeated, and then changed to loud breathing, so hoarse, everyone knows, with a whistle. Two guys grabbed some garbage like wooden legs from the floor, walked around the other rooms, and quickly realized that the sounds were not coming from the apartment. The girls flatly refused to go out into the entrance and climb out through the broken window. They were scared to death to even move. Then they decided to lock themselves in, since the latches on the doors remained intact. And the guys were sent to investigate, so that they found out who was breathing so terribly there. The guys realized that it was necessary to look at the bottom, but for some reason they were not even embarrassed, and did not think how simple breathing could be so loud. Shoulder to shoulder, they shivered around apartment after apartment, lighting themselves with one candle with a trembling flame that tried to go out, and a dim screen of an almost discharged phone. But no matter how much they wandered through the abandoned rooms, they still could not find the source of the sound. Then one guy froze, listened, motioned for the second to be silent, and he knelt down and put his ear to the wooden floor. The breathing became louder and louder. The guy jumped up, stared at his friend with huge eyes, and croaked. "It seems that someone is breathing underground." The second one says to him, "It seems that every apartment has its own cellar here." And indeed, there was a trapdoor with an iron ring on the handle in the kitchen. And then the versions differ. Someone says that the guys looked in there, saw something or someone, screamed in horror, and rushed up to the girls. They locked themselves in there with them, knocked out the boards on the window, and jumped from the second floor, in a pile of sand behind the house. Others claim that the cowardly boys did not even touch the hatch, and, after exchanging glances, rushed to run. And then they came to the conclusion that it was the house itself that was breathing like it was anticipating imminent death, because the next day it began to be demolished. We didn't have good friends and seniors, so it wouldn't have been possible to clarify the details. And it wasn't necessary. The pleasant feeling of an unsolved mystery only warmed the soul. The only time we saw a guy at the kiosks, who, according to rumors, put his ear to the floor, but never found the courage to come up and ask something. But how many things we imagined, talking about that ill-fated basement. From creepy ghost faces of all stripes to a huge throat, which the dying house breathed. And then, Lenchik appeared in our company, and put an end to all discussions. You can talk about his personality endlessly. There was such a sly person in every yard without exception. He was always weaving that he had a special version of Ta at home, where you can swim to our city, and even go to your house. That he had seen a maniac Leatherface, and a ghost in a wheelchair there several times, standing on a bridge near the village. But, unfortunately, it is impossible to go to his house and personally verify this, because at first his parents did not allow it. And then everything was completely deleted from the computer. And he gave the disk with the game to someone and forgot. Such a guy immediately captured our attention, and began to pour that he knows the terrible truth about that breath. My brother demolished this house, Patience, Lenchik told me. There's a shorter cellar that's actually deep, because it used to lead somewhere. Well, that's okay. The boy saw the coffin there, do you think? I answer, my brother himself said that he saw him. Only that one was already empty. Figure it out. How so? Our girlfriend, who studied a grade younger, turned pale. And that's it. Lenchik crossed his arms over his chest. The zombie escaped. Into a deep cellar. Ilyuka asked, squinting in disbelief. Do I know? Lenchik snorted back at him. Along the way, right. Or into the woods, maybe. Lenchik himself lived in a new residential complex on the 3rd floor. And the further we talked with him, the more terrible stories we learned. It seemed that the little ones existed in a pitch-black hell. According to his stories, There was not a single quiet night in this house, and every time something worse happened. He claimed that he constantly hears a quiet baby crying, but parents say that no kids live in the neighborhood. One day at 3 o'clock in the morning, Lenchik leaned his ear against the wall and suddenly felt it tremble. And then he heard a whisper. I was walled up. Lenchik shuddered, but did not get scared, and did not complain to his parents, but carefully forged the wallpaper with a ruler along the seam, and saw behind them the imprint of a child's pen, which almost immediately disappeared. Then he complained that every night he noticed a dark silhouette under the lamp on the sports field. A thin and tall man stands motionless, and so that his hands are visible, but his head is not. But one day Lenchik looked at him for too long, and he suddenly moved and took off. The light fell on his horribly disfigured face, and Lenchik saw that the man's mouth was sewn shut, and his eyes were all black with bloody smudges. Soon the driveway door slammed, and half a minute later, they began to break into the apartment for lunch. And the guy couldn't do anything, because he was sitting at home alone, and his phone was broken. Only by a miracle he managed to survive, and the creature left without coping with the strong iron door. And Lenchik also assured that the lights in the house are turned off several times a week, and in the pitch darkness of the apartments, people hear a quiet whisper. These are the spirits of funeral Germans flying out of the ground to find the deceased body and occupy it. Therefore, the dead in the complex should be treated with great caution. No one will be surprised if the corpse suddenly rises and leaves. Therefore, at funerals, all the dead are driven in advance with a knife blade right into the heart. But all his hoaxes were quickly revealed. Our classmates who lived in that complex quickly dispelled all these nonsense, and at the same time, told us what a dreamer Lenchik was. We called him, to put it mildly, a dreamer, and stopped taking his stories seriously. For about a year, we did not communicate with him. He was very offended by the nickname, and did not approach us. Only occasionally drove by on a bike, and listened to what we were talking about. But on the first day of the new summer holidays, we ourselves invited him to sit in the gazebo. And that's when he told us about the secret cellar. To the patient, honestly, I swear even. He drew an invisible cross on his chest with his finger. I'll tell you the truth. Remember when I was kidding about breathing? Well, that there was a coffin in the cellar. In short, I was joking then, it's honest. But everything turned out to be more terrible there. Honestly, damn it. He exclaimed when we started giggling. What's there? Ilyuka asked. I remember that in a year, he somehow quickly matured, stretched out, and found a peasant base. He really was deeper, it's not a rumor, answered Lenchik. My brother said that the mushroom types that were left over from the old houses have now sort of merged. I didn't understand anything. Ilyuka shook his head and laughed. But I immediately besieged him. It was very interesting to listen. Lenchik continued. If you climb into the basement, you can find a passage in depth. The old house, which had 2 floors, was standing somewhere there. He pointed to the door of the 3rd entrance. So, we need to go underground and find some steps or a passage. Yeah, go, Ilyuka waved his hand. You're a liar. And you don't have a brother, 100 pounds. I swear it. Lenchik did not let up, almost crying. Let's check it out, huh? Let's go, guys, I interceded, but for fun it's clean. Everyone looked at each other. One girl asked. And they won't give us a slap on the neck. If anything, then we'll blame everything on this nonsense. The kind-hearted Ilyuka grinned, and nodded at Lenchik. And there will be more crap to carry. We'll leave him sitting there. Lenchik shivered. No, let's stick together, or I won't go. Well and good, Ilyuka broke into a smile and returned to the gazebo. No one wanted to go with you anyway, right, guys? Then I couldn't stand it anymore. I remember how I defended this poor fellow Lenchik, and how I begged him not to blame him, and goosebumps run down my back. The fact is that there was something wrong with our adventure. Lenchik ran to the concierge, who was a friend of his grandmother, so he calmly went into the closet on the first floor, and, after chatting with the old lady, stole the right key. Fortunately, there was a tag with the inscription basement hanging on it instead of a keychain, so he didn't have to look for long. We were all waiting for the ringleader at the side of the house. Ilyuka kept asking, why the hell did we give up this underground passage at all? Why did we suddenly decide to explore it? And I didn't know what to say. And now I don't know. Either pity for a young liar, or a naive thirst for adventure. I imagined a complex and ancient system of labyrinths, which it would be very interesting to go around, and even draw a map, although I didn't really know what kind of deep passages there were. Soon, brandishing a key, a satisfied Lenchik rushed in. He took the lock off the door, hung it inside on the handle bracket, and, fearing that we would close it, asked someone to go ahead. I went with my girlfriend, followed by lunch with Ilyuka, and 3 more of our friends. We wandered to an indecent deck. We found the switch, turned on the light, it became easier. Despite the fact that the complex was new, its basement looked absolutely disgusting. Some pipes, rooms, nooks, the smell of dampness, and rotten meat. Surely a couple of innocent mice have already died somewhere. We staggered for about 30 minutes, then Ilyuka couldn't stand it and ordered everyone to wait. And then he got out and, as he later explained, went to count the steps from the end of the house to the 3rd entrance, so that he could at least roughly figure out in which part of the basement to look for this damn passage down. Soon he returned, and, counting aloud, reached another room with pipes and wires. And that's where something clicked. There is a huge black hole in the memory at this place. I don't remember at all how we got into these damn deep corridors, and how we ended up in a dimly lit patch. There's a dark turn behind us, apparently where we came from. Ahead is a long and wide passage with arches, rounded to the ceiling, in the manner of castle dungeons, lined with dark brown large bricks. Everyone except me, Lenchik, was illuminated by their phones. We walked forward, talking in a half-whisper, I don't remember what. We stopped at a fork, turned right into the same wide corridor. Here the bored Ilyuka sniffed, and began to talk a little louder. Dad worked at our brick factory in the 90s, but he always went home through the forest. Once he returns from the second shift in the dark, and sees that something is hanging on a tree. He braked while he took out a whitefish, while he was looking at a tree, and trying to see what was there. And think about it, this ant hanged herself. Dad came up to her, already sweating with fear, although it was November, the wind was beating. And Dad decided to check, like, if you're a living ant. I touched her foot, so it means that her shoe was right at the level of her face, well, because she climbed high. And he touches it, the ant does not move. Dad somehow turns it a little bit, and hears that the branch at the top is crunching, it was dry along the way. And how this woman will collapse on him, like a bag fell down, lay right on his shoulder. Dad jerked, dropped the cigar from his teeth, grabbed the corpse with both hands, and took it off. His aunt was like a child in his arms, did you understand? Well, what is there to do? It stinks, I want to vomit. But you can't leave it either, it's like a sin. He pulled her out on the path, walked sensitively to the first lamp, then looks at her face, and the woman opens her eyes, and smiles at him with all her mouth, and made such a loud sound, like ha. Dad already screamed, threw her and ran out of there. He looked back, and this creature was running after him. The face, like a mask, froze in this stupid smile. The iron. And louder is its shouts out. Dad was crossing himself right on the run, and the ant got rid of him. What a jerk you are, our girlfriend muttered. It's not the time at all now, do you understand? Everyone, let's go back. Guys, please, Lenchik begged. Well, let's walk a little more. No one was going to retreat, at least from the boys. We stood in front of the fork again. There were 3 ways. The crossroads, look, Ilyuka was surprised. We're probably under the forest by now. Hey, Gobber, where do these passages lead to? What did the brother say? I swore I wasn't lying. Lenchik was upset. He didn't tell me anything. He doesn't even know what's here. We moved to the right again, decided to always turn so as not to get confused until we draw a map. I imagined what a wonderful base you can organize here, because the network of underground passages is several heads higher than any hut, or even your own apartment. It would only be necessary to figure out how to light up these corridors. When I told Ilyuka about my thoughts, he immediately remembered another story. In the village, the boys were looking for a place for themselves. They also wanted to make a base. They found an abandoned one, so there is an old coast on the farm. The roof is almost whole. There is one hole in the middle, but it's not scary. There are also all sorts of nooks, columns. If you try, it will be fine in general. And the place is normal. It's not far to the river, but there are houses behind the hill. No one can peek. In the summer, they arranged everything there normally, went every day. I was still small, I was rarely taken. But I still remember very well how cool everything was there. And in the fall, all the city people left. Only red-haired Vovan remained from the whole group. He decided to stay there alone for now. And to clean everything for the winter so as not to spoil. They had old chairs there, homemade lockers. It's a pity if it disappears. And so he went there in the afternoon. The weather sucks. A cloud is coming, wind, rain is coming soon. And Vovan sees from afar that someone is standing on the roof of their coast. As soon as he took a closer look, he disappeared. He jumped into the hole along the way. And what about Vovan? He's a jock, he'll punch anyone in the face if necessary. Went boldly on. But the closer he got, the more terrified he became. He says his shoulders became heavy, and his back ached, and his legs refused to walk at all. So he stopped. He looks and sees a hunchbacked grandfather coming out of the coast, a stick in his hand, and a chain on top of the end. Vovan can't move from his place, but this one is rushing at him, knocking on the ground with a stick. The chain clanks. Lightning also appeared in the sky. Thunder crashed. In advance of the fright, he tore out of there so much that he raised dust. I told my grandmother, and she was all in tears, climbed for holy water, and let's wash Vovan on the threshold. She told me that you can't go to that coast, someone unclean lives there. While the crowd was walking, he must have been afraid to show himself, but now he's not afraid of anything. And that same night, Vovan heard this hunchback walking outside his windows, whispering something and knocking with a stick and chain. We stopped. Everyone was uneasy. Okay, Ilyuka exhaled. I won't scare you anymore. Let's go back. Then we'll come back with the papers. We'll draw a map. The Gobber didn't cheat, it turns out, right? You've got enough name-calling. Lenchik exclaimed, and immediately fell to the floor with a squeal from a strong blow to the nose. Blood flooded his chin. Close your mouth, Ilyuka barked, and you'll say it again, I'll tell you. Something rumbled ahead of us. My heart seemed to burst in my chest with horror. Fear pulsed through his entire body. The girls screamed and rushed back down the corridor. Ilyuka grabbed me by the sleeve and dragged me to the exit. His flashlight turned away from Lenchik sitting on the floor, and he was swallowed by the impenetrable darkness. I ran, forgetting everything, gasping for breath. bumping my shoulders against the ledges of the arches, stumbling. But I didn't even dare to think about stopping. I didn't hear a sound in the chase, blamed it on my blocked ears, but in fact everything turned out to be much worse. It was chasing us down a different path. We had already reached the first fork, when the light of a lantern pulled out of the darkness the disfigured face of our mutual girlfriend. Ilyuka screamed, and I, on the contrary, almost suffocated from a lump in my throat. And then a long, clawed paw the color of tree bark appeared in the pale light. Despite its large size, it looked emaciated, as if its owner had been starving for a long time. Ilyuka pulled the phone, and for a moment, showed us the most terrible image that could be imagined. The creature was unimaginably huge, and its elongated body went far into the dark corridor. The part of her that was next to us looked like a giant man. A face like a wooden mask. Dark bottomless eye sockets. They are disgusting hanging appendages, similar to tangled roots. The creature began to breathe, hoarsely and with a whistle. We felt its putrid breath on us. Somewhere in the depths of the underground passage, our friends screamed heartrendingly. Ilyuka took the flashlight beam aside, and, without letting go of me, rushed to the exit. And again a failure, like a scorched clearing in a mental forest. Then a basement with pipes and wires, steps, a creaking door, and blinding rays of the sun. Ilyuka was sobbing, howling at the top of his strident bass. And I sat and shook, barely making out what was going on around. How many years have passed, and I still don't remember how we got into that ill-fated deep basement. Later, both I and Ilyuka were in that place. Our parents were called by investigators. The matter is serious. Children have disappeared, perhaps even died, and the two survivors are talking outright nonsense. About some kind of maze. In the little room where, according to our estimates, there should have been a descent, there really was a small manhole, but only bricked up. And there were no corridors on the other side, only a small room, 2 by 2 meters. Apparently this was a strange continuation of the old cellar, which Lenchik's brother was talking about. Everything has gone awry since then. Sit-along glances, gossip, and new rumors forced my parents to take me in their arms and take me away from our neighborhood. And then from the city. I tried in vain to find at least a grain of memory. I worked with psychologists, went to hypnosis sessions, but all in vain. As soon as he graduated from the institute and earned some money, he secretly returned to his hometown for a couple of weeks. The residential complex Reknoi has recovered to more houses over the years. I walked there, timidly squinting at the door to the basement. Overpowering himself, he approached a small group of teenagers at the gazebo and started talking about rumors. The guys crumpled a little, but soon shared one story, about how several youngsters climbed into the basement and disappeared. However, no one takes such fairy tales seriously anymore. And these guys sincerely believe that all this is fiction for naughty children. I said goodbye to them, and left there, not even daring to go to the closed basement door. That's the whole story. It seemed to me that my memories would be restored if I described those events in detail. But alas, failure again. The only thing that remained to me after that incident, apart from a deep psychological trauma. This is nightmarish knowledge. The thing we saw was only a small part of some unimaginable ancient creature. And all these corridors are not labyrinths, but his receptacle. And it scares me to even think about what is at the center of this system. I don't know how Ilyuka's life turned out. People have told me a lot of things, but now I try to ignore any rumors. Maybe they'll lead me to that basement again.